The night was draped in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the city far below, as Emma and Aidan sat together on the rooftop where the stars seemed to descend just for them, wrapping the world in a veil of silver light. The air carried the sweetness of night-blooming jasmine, and every breath they took felt as though it was shared, as though the universe had carefully synchronized their hearts to beat in rhythm. Emma's gaze wandered to the sky, where the crescent moon hung like a fragile secret, and in that glow, she found the courage to let down the walls she had built for so long. Aidan's presence was steady, grounding, his arms stretched casually along the back of the bench, yet every inch of his body hummed with the same nervous energy she felt in her chest. When their eyes finally met, there was no need for rehearsed words or clever lines, the silence itself was the language of something greater, something timeless. When their eyes finally met, there was no need for rehearsed words or clever lines, the silence itself was the language of something greater, something timeless. She whispered stories of her fears, her dreams, and the scars no one else had ever noticed, and he listened as if each word was a rare gift. In turn, he confessed how the weight of expectation had often left him lost, how he had searched for a place where he could simply be, and somehow, he had found it here, in her quiet company. Every pause between their words became sacred, filled with the subtle brush of his fingers against hers, with the soft laughter that escaped when vulnerability turned into something lighter, freer. The rooftop was no longer concrete and steel but a sanctuary, a secret world that belonged only to them, where the stars bore witness to two souls daring to collide. It was not fireworks or sudden declarations that marked the night but the slow, steady bloom of intimacy, the kind that seeps into the soul like dawn breaking gently across a dark horizon. Emma realized she was no longer afraid of tomorrow because tonight had given her something eternal, an understanding that love does not always need promises shouted to the sky. Sometimes, it thrives in the quiet, in the stillness, in the simple miracle of finding someone who sees you completely. And as Aidan's hand finally closed around hers, firm and sure, the universe seemed to exhale in relief, as if it had been holding its breath all along, waiting for this very moment of midnight love to unfold. The night lingered as if it too wished to remain suspended in the moment, stretching time into something infinite, something sacred. Emma leaned closer, her shoulder brushing against Aidan's, and though the touch was simple, it sent a quiet rush through her veins, the kind that left her breathless in its honesty. She had never believed in fate, not really, but in that rooftop silence with the moonlight painting silver edges around his profile, it was hard not to wonder if some cosmic thread had pulled them both here, weaving their stories together without permission. Aidan tilted his head, watching her with an intensity that made her heart stumble, his eyes reflecting the starlight like oceans carrying secret constellations. "It feels like we've been here before," he murmured, and the words fell between them like a spell, wrapping Emma in a warmth she didn't know she was allowed to feel. She thought about how many nights she had spent searching for something nameless, gazing at the stars and hoping the universe would answer, and now here he was, someone who seemed to speak in the same unspoken language her soul had always longed for. They shared laughter that was both fragile and bold, laughter that came not from jokes but from the relief of finding someone who understood the rhythm of your silence. Her hand hovered near his, hesitant, trembling with 1,000 unsaid words, and when his fingers curled around hers, it wasn't fireworks that exploded but a steady fire, one that promised warmth rather than destruction. They didn't need to talk about tomorrow or forever because tonight was enough. This stolen hour under the gaze of the moon was more honest than all the promises they had ever been offered. The rooftop faded into something dreamlike, a place untouched by the noise of the city below, as if the world had paused just for them. And in that stillness, Emma realized that love wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic declarations, it was about presence, about someone staying when the world outside demanded they leave, about finding eternity in the quiet miracle of being seen. Time slipped quietly into the deep hours of midnight, but for Emma and Aidan, it was as if dawn would never come. The universe had stretched the moment into eternity, a fragile infinity balanced on the edge of their breath. The city below glimmered with distant lights, each window telling stories they would never know, yet none felt as vivid, as alive, as the story unfolding between them now. Aidan leaned back against the bench, pulling her gently with him, and Emma found herself resting against his chest, the steady thrum of his heartbeat grounding her more than any words ever could. She closed her eyes and listened to that rhythm, feeling as though she had finally discovered the song she was meant to dance to all along. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch delicate, reverent, as if he were afraid she might disappear like a dream if he wasn't careful. "You feel like home," he whispered, and though the words were simple, they unraveled something deep within her, something she had kept locked away behind walls of caution and fear. No one had ever said it before, not like this, not with the kind of raw truth that made it impossible to doubt. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness but of release, the kind that came when someone finally saw the storms you had hidden and chose to stay anyway. She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the warmth beneath his shirt, and whispered back, "And you feel like the place I've been searching for." The rooftop became a cathedral, the stars their stained glass, the night air their hymn, and for the first time, Emma didn't pray for answers because she had found one sitting right beside her. Their lips met in a kiss that wasn't rushed or desperate but tender, drawn out, carrying the weight of everything unspoken, and when they finally parted, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. It wasn't about needing each other to be whole, it was about choosing to share their wholeness, to let the midnight bear witness to a love that had quietly blossomed between two souls who hadn't even realized how much they had been waiting. And as the night stretched on, neither cared about the dawn waiting impatiently on the horizon, for in that moment, in that sacred stillness, Emma and Aidan had already found forever. The hours melted away unnoticed, as if time itself was reluctant to interrupt what was unfolding between them. The rooftop, once a forgotten perch above the city, had become their universe, a place where the rules of ordinary life no longer applied. Emma tilted her head back and let her eyes wander across the stars, each one burning quietly in the velvet expanse, and she felt a strange kinship with their glow. "Do you think the stars remember us?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with wonder, half serious and half dreaming. Aidan turned to look at her, his lips curving into that small smile that always seemed to say more than words. "Maybe," he said after a pause, "maybe every star is a memory, and tonight, they're adding us to their collection." The thought wrapped around Emma like a tender embrace, and she closed her eyes, imagining some distant star holding this moment, preserving it long after they were gone. She had always been afraid of impermanence, of the way people drifted away, of how promises faded with time, but sitting here, listening to Aidan speak, she began to understand that love wasn't about holding forever in your hands. It was about daring to be fully present, to let a single night become eternal by the depth of how you lived it. She shifted closer, tucking herself under his arm, and felt the subtle way his body relaxed, as though he too had been waiting for this closeness, this surrender. Their conversation slipped effortlessly between laughter and quiet confessions, between the silly and the profound, as if their souls had known each other far longer than their bodies had. Emma found herself admitting things she had never shared with anyone, the childhood fears that still haunted her, the unspoken dreams she had hidden in the corners of her heart, and each time, Aidan listened with a patience that felt holy. He didn't try to fix her or reshape her, he simply held space, allowing her to exist exactly as she was. And in return, she gave him her listening, her presence, a sanctuary he had been searching for without even realizing it. Their hands remained intertwined, fingers laced in a quiet vow, and Emma thought about how strange and beautiful it was that sometimes love doesn't crash into your life like a storm but rather arrives like this, soft, steady, and inevitable, like the tide returning faithfully to the shore. Midnight deepened around them, the city lights flickering like scattered jewels, and though the world outside remained unchanged, within them, everything was different. They were no longer two solitary souls wandering beneath the stars, they were something more, something shared, something quietly infinite. And in that realization, Emma felt the last of her defenses fall away, leaving only the truth of her heart, raw and unguarded, beating in perfect rhythm with his. The horizon was beginning to soften, the first threads of dawn weaving pale gold into the edges of the night sky, but Emma and Aidan remained on the rooftop, reluctant to surrender the magic that had bound them through the long hours of midnight. The city below was waking slowly, lights flickering out one by one as morning stretched across its streets, yet up here, time still felt suspended, as if the sun itself hesitated to intrude on something so sacred. Emma's head rested against Aidan's shoulder, her fingers still entwined with his, and for the first time in years, she felt no urgency to escape, no restless ache pulling her toward someplace else. Instead, she felt grounded, as though she had finally discovered the anchor she didn't know she had been searching for. Aidan tilted his head to watch the faint blush of dawn painting her face, and he marveled at how someone could look both fragile and infinite at the same time. "The night doesn't want to end," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of both truth and longing. Emma smiled faintly, her eyes half closed, savoring the moment. "Maybe it doesn't have to," she whispered, and though she knew the day would come, her words weren't about stopping time, they were about carrying the night forward, about letting its memory live in them forever. They spoke then of ordinary things, favorite books, childhood dreams, the small joys that stitched together the fabric of their lives, as though to prove that love wasn't built only on extraordinary moments but also on the simplicity of being human together. Every laugh, every glance, every pause became another layer of the bond growing between them, and by the time the sky was glowing with full morning light, it was clear to them both that they had crossed an invisible threshold. They were no longer strangers, no longer two solitary souls brushing against each other in the night. They had become something more, two lives entwined, carrying the quiet certainty that what began under the stars would not end with the sunrise. Aidan pressed a soft kiss to Emma's temple, and in that tender gesture, there was a promise unspoken yet deeply understood, that even when life pulled them into its noise, they would remember this stillness, this rooftop sanctuary, this night when love bloomed gently but irrevocably. Emma closed her eyes, holding the moment in her heart like a treasure, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, she would never again walk the world as she had before. For she had been seen, she had been found, and in the quiet hours of midnight love, she had learned that forever doesn't always announce itself with thunder, it sometimes arrives in silence, under the gaze of stars, and stays with you long after the dawn has come.